Normally, if you take a cruise, your cabin will be one of hundreds or thousands of identical boxes made and then slid into the side of the cruise ship. There isn't normally a lot of variety between cabins, and even across different cruise lines, they tend to look fairly similar. It wasn't like that on my last cruise though, because I stayed in a suite on a luxury super yacht called the Emerald Azzurra. There were only 84 other guests on the ship, and I saw and did things that I could never have imagined pre-cruise. There were dramatic highs and lows, and it definitely wasn't what I expected. Usually when I cruise, you'll find me in the cheapest inside cabin, probably right at one end of the cruise ship, and usually in a location that many people would call undesirable. So I really didn't know what to expect when I boarded this ship in Athens. This was so far out of my normal world. I knew that the cabin would be bigger than what I was used to, but apart from that, I really had no idea how they could make a cabin luxurious. I was assigned cabin 502 right at the front of deck 5. The cabin is one of only 14 balcony cabins on this deck, and we were located right next to the bridge. I was nervous about feeling movement and feeling seasick being on such a small ship, but only time would tell how I would find the motion of the ocean. When we embarked, we walked straight into this reception area and up 2 flights of stairs to deck 5. We didn't have very far to go to our cabin, and this would quickly become one of my favourite things about cruising on a yacht. When we first found the cabin, I was amazed by the size. Usually cruise ship cabins are long and kind of thin, but the main part of the cabin felt almost as wide as it was long. The cabin is a very impressive 29 square meters, and that might not sound huge, but when you consider that the ship is only 110 meters long in total, and that the average cruise ship balcony cabin on the big ships is only 18 meters squared, that is pretty impressive. There was even enough space for me to collapse onto the floor when we came back from a very hot excursion. I really liked it down here. It was always very cool, and that was thanks to the air conditioning, which was fantastic. I loved the decor in the room, and I quickly noticed that something was very different from every cruise ship cabin that I've been in before. Usually cruise ship cabins are just metal boxes, and as a result all of the walls are magnetic. The walls of this cabin though had thick material squares on top, and it definitely made it feel more like a luxurious hotel room than a cruise ship cabin. It was great for keeping out noise too. On a lot of cruise ships you can hear everything that your neighbours do, but we didn't hear any noise from anybody else. To the left, I noticed a big desk area with these magical looking machines. These were actually what we used when we went out on excursions, and they meant that we could listen to our guide even when they weren't near us, which was really good. There were a couple of bottles here too, which we got to keep, and a few plug sockets. There was a minibar here, which we didn't use during our cruise. We did have the all-inclusive drinks package, which meant that we had pretty much all of the drinks on the ship included, but it still didn't include drinks from the minibar, which I did find a little bit odd. This cruise definitely isn't a budget option, and given that we could have had any drinks at any of the bars any time, it did feel a little bit weird that I couldn't even drink the soda from the minibar, but really we didn't have very far to go if we wanted to go to a bar for a drink. There was a secret message inscribed in my menu, and if I had a crayon, I'd have done that thing where you rub it on the paper to reveal the secrets, but I don't normally pack crayons when I cruise, so I couldn't do that. Beyond that was a kettle, a coffee machine, and a couple of jugs of water that were filled up for us every day. There was a big TV with lots of movies on it, and on quite a lot of cruise lines you'll have to pay for the movies, but all of the ones on here were free, so we did watch quite a few during the cruise. The TV also had the daily schedule on it, and it would update every evening with what was happening the next day. We could see what was happening out the front of the cruise ship too, which was very, very cool when we went through the Corinth Canal, but more about that in a separate video. I was looking forward to watching the sail away from the balcony, but first I headed into the bathroom to have a look around. The bathroom was clean and comfortable and stylish, and it was pretty similar to bathrooms I've had on cruise ships in the past, but this one did have a bonus thing here to wash your bum and lots of storage. We did have one problem with this bathroom, but more about that later. Heading back into the cabin, I decided to test out my bed before heading out onto the balcony. The beds were incredibly soft and comfortable, and the pillows were fluffy, and it was very much like being surrounded by a fluffy cloud. To the side there are a couple of little indents where I put things like my pajamas and my phone. There definitely wasn't a shortage of plug sockets in this cabin, and I was very happy to see a universal socket, meaning that I didn't have to use an adapter. There weren't any bedside tables here, but this shelf kind of took that role, even if it did make Captain Hudson look a little bit scary. There were bedside lights here though, and laying in bed and watching the sunset through the big windows, it was incredible. It felt so peaceful. Heading out onto the the balcony, I was really impressed by the size. It's about as wide as other cruise ship balconies, but it stretched quite a long way, and we had 2 chairs and a table on it. I, of course, being the nosy person that I am, decided to peer around the edge of my balcony, and to my surprise, I could see right into the bridge, and I could see these bridge bits on the side. I don't really know what you would call these, but you get the idea. We were actually able to go out on this deck anytime, and we could just walk into the bridge because the ship has an open bridge policy. Usually on a cruise ship you can't go in the bridge, and if you can, it's probably because you've booked and paid for a tour of the bridge. The idea of just walking in and talking to the captain who's driving the ship, that is something very, very special. I sat down in the comfortable chair and we were so close to the water. We were only on deck 5. At this point we weren't moving, so I couldn't really hear it, but as the cruise went on, I'd often sit out here and sort of just listen to the waves. At night it was amazing too, because you could see all of the stars. There's really not much light pollution from a yacht. There's something very, very special, I think, about sitting out at night and looking and just seeing the sea in every direction. Some people do find that very scary, but I find it very relaxing. In front of the balcony was a curtain and a big blind that came down when I pressed this button. You could get around the blind if it was down, which is good. I do like to have a look out in the morning before opening the blind completely, and I also like to pop out later in the evening, even though I've already convinced myself that it's bedtime and I've put down the blind. It's almost cooler to be out here in your pajamas. I'm not sure why, but the blackout blind was very, very good, and there was never any light creeping in. The word pajamas, or more the spelling of the word pajamas, is your Britishism of the week. Here in Britain we spell pajamas with a Y, but I have seen it spelt with an A, mostly in American English, and spelt instead of spelled is another Britishism, but we can do that one another week. It was around now that our luggage arrived in our room and we started to unpack. There was loads of storage in this cabin. There were these big drawers on the desk, and our wardrobe had 2 big sections. There was a great bits and bobs drawer too in the desk for all of the general stuff that you need when you cruise, like hairbands and cables and pens and pencils. This is the first cabin I've ever been in where I've seen specific shoe storage like this. We definitely had far more shoe storage space than shoes, and I'm not sure why this one is glowing, but there you go. The safe was huge, and you could fit a laptop in it and more. I love the way that it loaded from the top, and I think you're far less likely to forget something if you can see everything in the safe. Normally when you look into a safe, it's like just looking into a black hole and there could be anything in there, but you could see everything in this one. Usually I put my suitcase under my bed when I cruise, and as the cruise goes on, I'll put my dirty clothes into the suitcase. That way it kind of packs itself. I noticed that there were hard sides to the bed, and I had read that our cabin steward would put our suitcases under here for us. My dad did decide to put his under there himself. He's a DIY kind of man, but I decided to put mine in the wardrobe so that I could carry on putting my dirty clothes in there, and we had plenty of storage space to spare. That was not a problem. There was also a little sofa which I'd lay on to catch up with my work, and a big chair over by the mirror. Personally, I think it's things like this giant mirror that really made the cabin feel luxurious. Perhaps it's because mirrors aren't cheap, and they definitely aren't easy to replace if they get broken. Luckily, nothing in this cabin, or the entire ship for that matter, was damaged, and it all felt very, very new, very sparkly. Perhaps my favourite thing in the wardrobe, more so than all of my clothes, was this robe. These are provided in all of the cabins, and they are huge, they are so soft, they have a hood, and they have pockets. What more could you ask for? I was pretty impressed with this cabin visually, but none of that was really the thing that surprised me about it. That was still to come. Our cabin was cleaned twice a day, every single day of this cruise, and I came back to a surprise here once or twice a day. Whenever I go on a cruise, I bring our channel mascot Captain Hudson. You may have seen him in my videos before. He was created to raise money for a charity called Mercy Ships, and this clever cat has raised over £28,000 for charity, so he's a good boy. There are over 3,000 of him in existence, and normally he just sits and looks after the cabin. On this cruise though, every day when I came back to my room, Captain Hudson had been up to something else that was exciting. One day I found him having a spa day, the next he was having afternoon tea with a friend, and even reading a book in the evening. I tried my best to create situations for my cabin steward to find too, but she was far more creative than me. And I mean, look at this, she even cut down the little straw for him. That is adorable. I thought that this would be it for Captain Hudson's adventures, extras, but there was even more when I came back to my cabin later in the cruise, but more about that later. Of course, even having amazing staff can't fix every problem. I'm sure they would do almost anything for you, but there are some things that are just out of their control, like the weather. I was worried about feeling bad movement due to the size of the ship, and I definitely did feel that on this cruise. I was aware of the movement about half the days, and one day it did get pretty rough. I took my seasickness pills and I felt fine, but it definitely was like being on a rocky ocean ship. I even tried this new wristband that I bought that was meant to treat seasickness, but it turns out that being electrocuted in the wrist really isn't that pleasant. Who knew? It sure does distract you from the fact that you're feeling seasick, but at what cost? Over by the door were 2 buttons that we could press if we wanted to not be disturbed or if we wanted our room made up. These would turn on the lights outside the room so our cabin steward knew what we wanted. It was so much better than that old-fashioned paper type, and the technology on this ship did work very well. You would hope that it would for a ship that's only a couple of years old, but still, I'm always impressed by the little things like the nightlight in the bathroom that was on all the time. It was red, so it did make things look a little bit evil, but I really appreciated it when using the bathroom at night. We did find that the water would go everywhere after a shower because the shower door was directly on the floor, so there was no way that you could put a shower mat down without it moving when you open the door and releasing all of the water like a big wave. I did find that one quite amusing because it is a very common cruise ship complaint, and it just goes to show that even expensive yachts, all of them don't have this problem fixed. Each night we also found a little chocolate on the pillow, which was nice, but it wasn't as nice as finding this on my bed. I came back one evening to see all of this. Pictures of Captain Hudson and his adventures in the bridge, in the kitchen. He'd even had a massage in the spa, and I had no idea that he'd left my cabin at all. On big cruise ships, you'll normally find that the crew to passenger ratio is around 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 if you're lucky, but on this ship there were 76 crew members for only 85 guests, which meant that even toy cats were treated like royalty. Emerald Azzurra does have a few ocean view cabins lower down, and she has a lot of bigger suites with huge balconies at the back. There aren't any inside cabins on board, and that's because most luxury ships don't have inside cabins. Last year I did manage to find an inside cabin on a bigger luxury ship, and when the price of the cruise came down to within my budget, I decided that I had to book it. I really had no idea how they could make an inside cabin luxurious, but to find out how I found that and what I thought of the smallest bathroom I've ever had on a cruise ship, check out this video next. I'll see you over there.